morning, Bardstown and Nelson County, and welcome to another edition of Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks here and my co-host, Margie Bradford. And that's my laptop dinging in the background. Good morning, Margie.
Good morning, Jim.
Well, we have a very special Friday edition of Bradford and Brooks today.
Yes.
And we're very fortunate to have this opportunity and to have our very special guest who will be joining us by telephone.
Absolutely. It's not often that our guest ends up a headline on the front page of the Courier-Journal.
Or in the national news as well.
Right.
All right, and this guest we're talking about is State Representative Charles Booker. And Representative Booker is a candidate for the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. And the winner of the Democratic primary will oppose Mitch McConnell in the fall.
Yes.
And Mr. Booker, and Margie and I, this is an exciting primary, I think.
Yes, it is. You did. Well, we haven't had our big race at Churchill down, but we're having a big race right now, and a preamble to the one in the fall.
Right, and we will have had all the three top candidates.
Yes.
On the radio show, so I'm real happy about that. And of course, we're talking the
Matt Breuer,
who was on earlier, and then Amy McGrath.
Yes.
And of course, we're familiar with her campaign advertisements. And then today we will have Representative Booker on.
Yes.
And Mr. Booker is peaking right now.
Right.
His campaign is the latest poll I showed from yesterday is that he's ahead of Amy McGrath in the primary.
Yes. Yes.
And that's quite a come from behind when you consider how much money Amy McGrath has had and how much she spent in advertising.
This poll, which was conducted by Oakland, California-based political organization, and it shows Charles Booker leading McGrath by 44% to 36% in the primary. Mike Breuer is about 4%. He's had much less money and much less exposure.
Right, but Booker has Mr. Booker has gotten national press. I saw a story yesterday on The Hill, which is a political website that, and he's getting national attention. I know MSNBC and some of the other cable news networks have taken notice of this primary, which. You know, a lot of times these sorts of primaries don't always get this kind of attention.
No.
But Mr. Booker is an African American who lives in the West End of Louisville. He's an attorney. He's young. I think he's 35 is what I read, and he's very well spoken, and he's doing an excellent job at challenging the status quo. I.e. Amy McGrath's campaign.
Right. No, he's definitely in the progressive vein.
Right, and Amy McGrath Margie and I talked about this before. Amy McGrath is walking that line of being a moderate or middle of the road type of Democrat, and Mr. Booker and then Mr. Breuer, they're both more progressive than he. Mr. Breuer's campaign really hasn't gotten a lot of traction statewide. He doesn't have the money.
No, he just doesn't have the exposure. He has been depending on trying to connect with the local newspapers and the local radio stations,
right.
and has worked at that. But he doesn't have he doesn't have that much of a statewide organization, even though Andrew Yang had donated his workers to him, and which did give him some help.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really difficult to run a statewide campaign with a limited budget.
Right, and that's kind of what he's been faced against.
Right.
Now, Mr. Booker has, like I say, he's really come on strong in the last few weeks, and he's getting not just national press, but he's also picking up some very important endorsements.
Oh, yes. And I know there have been several articles in the paper about some of the endorsements he's picked up. particularly from people in the House of Representatives, people who know him and have worked with him, are impressed with him and endorsed him. I mean, they might have anyway, but I think that's given the fact that we already had a strong candidate in McGrath. I think that the fact that he picked up those endorsements is telling.
Right, and he's kind of a man at the right time. His campaign ads note that he's been involved in the protests regarding police brutality, and and in his campaign he really brings it. He makes it very clear he's a progressive, but he also makes it clear that he's also a man for coming up with solutions, bringing people together and solving problems. And I think that's at this time, with all the turmoil nationally, I think that's a message that really resonates.
Right.
So anyway, he'll be joining us in just a few minutes, but this will be a very interesting primary on the Democratic side. And of course, I think Mitch McConnell's the presumed winner of the Republican primary.
Yes.
Despite the fact there are a number of candidates running against him.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Booker, I presume, was in town yesterday, was supposed to be in town for an appearance here. I was not able to get to that, but I know they had been advertised to be in town for an appearance. So I haven't had a chance to speak to anyone about how that turned out.
Okay, let's see. The story from Wednesday notes that Mr. Booker's been touring the state, making campaign stops, and of course, you're kind of limited right now to how large a crowd you can have. But
that makes it. Let's face it. This pandemic has changed all the rules of the game.
It sure has. And then you're also, and I think he's been very good about having outdoor events too.
Right.
And the weather's cooperated, and that makes things a little easier because there's more room to socially distance.
Right.
All right.
We gotten our call yet?
No, still waiting. But anyway, like I said, Mr. Booker is peaking in the polls, and the momentum really has shifted towards him, I think, and he's got a good message that's resonating. And when he calls in, we'll find out more about his campaign and what he. Of course, campaign ads are just snippets of information.
Yes.
And we will have an opportunity to have him expound on his philosophy. And of course, he's a freshman legislator in the General Assembly. I think he's voted been a legislator, I think, for 18 months.
Yeah,
something under 2 years,
which is a little unusual for
right
to be a serious candidate for statewide office.
Right. Anyway, locally now, I don't know that we've talked about this, but the word from Nelson County Clerk Jeanette Sidebottom's office is that they will not have election results election night.
Right.
So that for Margie and I, who are used to being together and reporting on election returns, it's kind of disconcerting. What? No election returns election night, but.
They're not even going to give you subtotals.
Right. And of course the issue is with the absentee ballots and the number of ballots out.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
People have up until the day of the election to have them postmarked.
Midnight.
Right.
Midnight of the day of the election.
Yeah, and so you could presumably mail a ballot on Tuesday, June 23rd, and it may not hit the clerk's office until Friday.
Right. In fact, I think they are projecting that it will be a week before we know the final result of it. And, I can understand that. Sure. I mean, you have to give a chance for people's ballots to get in and be counted.
Well, and especially...
I mean, this pandemic has just changed the rules. It's been kind of topsy-turvy.
Right. And when you consider that how many people normally vote absentee, probably less than 2,000.
Oh, yeah.
It seems to me it's around 1,000, 1,200 maybe. But then you've got several thousand people who have voted absentee. And so I know they've been trying to count ballots along the way, but still, who isn't, the normal person is going to say, whoops, I got to get that in before the 23rd. So they will have probably a rush of ballots coming in early next week and for several days afterwards.
Yeah.
After the election.
Yeah.
And, now
You just have to remember that counting these ballots is going to take longer than
much longer
because you have machines tallying. In a normal election, most of the tallying is done by machines.
That's right. All right. Well, Margie, I think we have we've got a caller on the line. Line 4. Let me, let's see, somebody picked it up, so we'll get the word. It's probably our guest who'll be joining us. Mm-hmm. All right, it is. All right, so let's see. Let me hit all the right buttons, and we'll get Mr. Booker on the line here. All right. Good morning. You're on Bradford and Brooks. Welcome.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
Good morning.
Just for our listeners, our guest today is Representative Charles Booker, and we're very happy to have you on today, and thanks for coming on.
The pleasure is all mine. It's a very special day.
Well, it is a very special day for you. I told Jim it's not often we have a guest on our show who is front page news. So we are bathing in the glow of your brilliance here. So we're so glad to have you on.
Yes, and as Margie said, front page news, but not just local, statewide news. There's been lots of the national media are following this Democratic primary now, and you seem to be surging in the polls with your message. And so anyway, we want to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
I will tell you that now Margie's the Democrat, and I'm the Republican of the show. But I will tell you how impressed I have been with your ads and the way things are running in this primary. I'm a former Democrat, and Margie's always trying to recruit me to come back.
I'm trying to lure him back from the dark side.
But anyway, I've been very impressed with your campaign and advertisement. And anyway, you seem to have the momentum really building, and that's exciting. It has to be exciting.
It really is humbling, and this is a moment where we got to stand together, no matter what our party is or what part of the Commonwealth we're from. Mm-hmm. We're family, and I'm just proud to be a part of this. Regular people fighting back for our future.
Well, I know that you're unashamedly progressive, and but you also talk in your ads about that. We need to come together as a state, as a nation. We need to solve issues that we have, and of course, there's a lot of turmoil nationally, that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Well, for me, I'm not doing this for politics. I'm standing up because I've seen so much struggle. I've seen so many challenges in my own life, having ration insulin. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and not having enough money. And I live in what has for years been the poorest zip code in the state. And, I saw my mom go without eating so I could eat. We're working multiple jobs just to struggle. And, these types of things aren't partisan.
Right.
Trying to keep the lights on and put food on the table and afford your medication, that's not partisan. And, in a community like mine in the west end of Louisville, which actually has much more in common with Appalachia than it does the rest of Louisville even, jobs have left, unemployment's been high for years. There are a lot of folks that are homeless. Folks are just struggling to make ends meet. And so, for me, I know that the only way we'll effectually change is if we lead for it. And we certainly can't wait for Mitch McConnell to finally decide he cares about us. And so, I'm taking this stand to beat him so that we can transform our future.
Well, I think your message is on target, and I think that now, even as a Republican, I really expected Mitch McConnell not to run this time, and to segue into some younger leadership, or at least as a state senator. or U.S. Senator, I'm sorry. So I was kind of surprised he ran again, but,
Yeah.
Margie always tells me, well, he's his favorite candidate. And
Yeah.
she and I have some interesting conversations about Senator McCall, as you might expect.
I'm not surprised. And he was elected 2 weeks after I was born. And so he's literally been screwing us my entire life. And, that's, I mean, you find 20 people once we get off this show, and I'm sure most of them, if not all of them, don't like the guy,
Right.
And so for me, it's an understanding that he's trying to build power for himself, not to improve the lives in Kentucky. There's no excuse for Kentucky being at the bottom in essentially every index of a good quality of life when we have someone in office who is supposed to be the most powerful Republican. Because Donald Trump ain't even a Republican, and so the fact that he's there and he's building all this power and he's leaving us high and dry and stranded on the track is inexcusable, and we can't afford it. We can't afford it anymore.
Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know you've shared a little bit, but about how you came to run, and what was the deciding factor for you, and how you built your alliances, because you've got an impressive amount of alliances here.
Yeah, well, I stumbled into politics. Both my parents dropped out of high school, and I have a really big family. I'm one of about 71 grandkids. It's actually more than that. I just stopped counting. and my dad dropped out to go to the Army, and my mom dropped out to become mom number 2 because there's so many of us, and she was helping my grandma. And so, I grew up on food stamps and free lunch, and it frustrated me to see so many people working so hard just to struggle. And both my parents are ministers, too. And I just always knew that we're more than conquerors. We can do more and then just struggle and die. And I wanted to get into government because I know there are people making decisions about our lives that don't see us. And a lot of Kentuckians feel that way. And so, my policies are built around not just beating Mitch McConnell. We're trying to beat him so that we can do the work. We need to end generational poverty. We need to make sure we're dealing with inequity that robs communities from Appalachia all the way to the Purchase from being able to do anything more than just struggle. And, because I tell my story and I've worked across Kentucky, so I was a director of Fish and Wildlife. I've worked in local government, Metro Council, Mayor's office, and for the Legislative Research Commission. I've worked with small farmers trying to compete in the commercial market. And of course, as a state legislator, standing up for minors, standing up for teachers, standing up for folks that are being left behind. And because of all this work and being on the picket lines and fighting for labor, a lot of folks are standing with me. And I'm proud of this coalition that is bipartisan. It goes all across Kentucky, and this is what we need to do to win, and we will.
All right. Now it sounds like you've worked in different sectors of government, local government like the city of Louisville, and then also state government too, as director of Fish and Wildlife. What lessons do you bring about how things change in government from that sort of experience?
Yeah, and I also worked in Congress. So I did during law school. I interned for a couple years for Congressman Gregory Meeks out of New York, and then I also worked with Congressman Yarmouth here in Kentucky. And so seeing the local, state, and federal government and seeing how they interact or how they should to bring more resources to Kentucky is really important. Just understanding how we can create more development, spur more industries, and things like legalization. And instead of criminalizing poverty and criminalizing a plant, we can invest in communities across Kentucky. We can help small farmers. We can help folks that haven't been able to find employment, get gainful employment, and be business owners as well. And so just having that lens of seeing how they all can work together is going to allow me to go to Washington with a lot of wind behind my back, because we need some leadership that understands how to be a statesman. We got to get a lot of work done. I mean, we got a lot of reasons to be pissed off. But beyond that, we got to get to work. And that's what I'm going to bring to Washington.
Well, I know that, I have made many trips to East Kentucky, and got some really good friends down there, Louise Hazard, Corbin, And one of the things, of course, I'd never been further east than Winchester before until I started going down to Eastern Kentucky, and that one of the things that hit me, two things. Number one, the beauty of the mountains, but also the depth of the poverty and the lack of opportunity that the people have there. And it's an interesting comparison with West Louisville, because years ago when I was a very young man, I delivered car parts throughout West Louisville, and I understand the challenges. It's both areas have share very much in common. The lack of an economy, a working economy.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why my message is about us standing together. And I've often said, from the hood to the holler, we got to stand as Kentuckians so that we can transform our future. And I think that's why we're able to build so much support. I'm talking about issues that you deal with when you sit down at the table. I'm not playing the political games. I'm not worried about what consultants from outside Kentucky are saying or thinking. I'm talking about the challenges we're really facing and saying that this is about us. We're Kentuckians. And, I'll put us up against anybody on the planet. It's the best place. And that means that we deserve resources. We deserve job opportunities. We deserve to be invested in our public education and to have investment in broadband and support our rural hospitals and just give folks a chance to dream and to thrive and grow. And we can win that. And getting rid of Mitch McConnell will do so much toward that goal, because you pick the issue, he's blocking progress for Kentucky.
Well, he certainly... even as a Republican, I can't deny that he has, and still, I know that I get the press releases. Well, McConnell helped Kentucky get X number of dollars doing this or that, but as the most powerful, one of the most powerful people in Washington, you wonder why there's not more done. Why?
Yeah.
And even I wonder about what more could be done to help alleviate poverty, bring more job opportunity to Kentucky.
And you notice he usually holds those things up until right before he runs.
Now he's brilliant. I'll give him that. He just doesn't use it to benefit us. And now we'll see a lot of smoke screens. And at this point, we got to know that's what it is. You'll see an announcement of an investment or project here or there, and then as the dust settles, we're still trying to keep the lights on. We're still trying to figure out, how we're going to take care of our children, what we're going to do when our jobs are leaving. And that's why I'm talking about structural issues. How do we make sure everyone has health care? And we got to do that. That's an economic policy just as much as a health care policy, and our current system is not sustainable. We're paying a lot of money that goes into administrative costs. That doesn't mean that we're healthier. And so that's really the work. We got to invest in people. We got to prioritize the people of Kentucky, because we've been left behind for too long. I have been surprised when you're talking about your background. I'd not really read all of that. Maybe you would like to enlarge a little bit on your previous positions that would give you more depth here in this race. Yeah, well, in working at the local, state, and federal level, and then working with some nonprofits across Kentucky and across the country, one in particular was specifically focused on helping small farmers compete in the commercial market. And we know that a lot of the small farms, family farms, are being choked out, especially, after the tariffs were put in place. And the question is, how do we create new industries? How do we provide direct resources to farmers? How do we make sure they have health care as well? The issue of suicide with small family farmers is a big issue. And then also just understanding that, as you mentioned, Kentucky is so beautiful. We have so many opportunities to create new industry, and that's what I've been fighting for in the State House. I was a co-sponsor on legalization of cannabis. I was also co-sponsor on expanded gaming. I'm a big supporter of investing in rural parts of Kentucky, especially rural hospitals. But I also want to make sure that we actually get broadband to everyone. Internet is a utility, and so it's just a lot of these foundational things. And standing with labor to not only raise wages, but make sure that we're making it easier for folks to be heard and get benefits they need, so that you're not having to work multiple jobs just to pay the rent. And then also, knowing that our system here in Kentucky, we've been one of the most disenfranchised states in the country for a long time. It's been hard for people to vote and be heard. That executive order that was put forward was in part because of my bill for restoration of voting rights, which will help a lot more Kentuckians be heard. So we can do this work. We can transform our future. We just need to stand as Kentuckians, and we're ready to do it. I think the pandemic and the height of racial tension we're seeing has really ignited a sense of urgency because we know that if we don't stand, it can get worse. And so we will.
Well, Representative Booker, I know that you're in favor of health care for all. And, I'm sure we all lived through the debate of President Obama and Obamacare. And, of course, being a Republican, I heard all the evils, et cetera, proclaimed about it. And then, but then I saw the benefits of not having pre-existing conditions as a problem getting health care or insurance, and being able to keep your children on your policy until they're 26, and a lot of common sense changes came about, and so I understand the reason to go back towards that model, but one of the criticisms I always heard was, well, how do we afford it? How do we? How would you propose that we afford to expand health care for all? Because now I would have argued years ago that health care is something you afford, but it's not a right. But anymore, it is a right, and everybody should have a right to have health care.
Yeah, I fully believe that health care is a human right, and what I've said is nobody should have to die because they don't have money in their pocket. And when I say that, I speak from a very personal place because, as I mentioned, I'm a type 1 diabetic. And I had to ration my insulin because it was either get my refill or make sure my daughters could eat for the week until payday. I got 2 girls as my bosses, and I'm going to choose them every daggone time. And I fell into diabetic ketoacidosis, and they didn't expect me to make it out of the hospital. And a lot of Kentuckians know that story. And, what I've been trying to say is that we cannot simply take incremental steps here, because what you were talking about in terms of how do we afford it, we can't afford not to do it. When you see how we put so much money into administrative costs annually, over $500 billion, that's not going to make people healthy. That's going into folks' pockets.
Right.
And, the bigger question is, we can't afford to continue to let these big corporations and these big industries make all these profits while we're struggling to survive. But we can absolutely afford to provide health care for everyone. And if we do it, we're going to spur our economy because people are healthy enough to be employed, healthy enough to advance their education, own a business. We're going to invest in infrastructure. We can beef up and strengthen up our hospitals, our health care facilities, so that Kentuckians are not at the bottom when it comes to cancer rate, diabetes, asthma, kidney issues, you name it. And as a result of that, we have the potential to create more dollars circulating in our communities, create more opportunity for folks that are living in the struggles. And this is the work of transforming our future. So that is really one of the biggest issues. And I'm telling you, with this pandemic happening and us dealing with unemployment at the highest levels we've seen in our state's history, it's clear that your health care shouldn't be tied to employment. Because everybody's losing their jobs,
Right.
And so I just think that this moment is helping people to see that this is not radical, that this is actually good public policy to invest in people.
Right.
The pandemic has also really made us aware of how important small business is, even mom and pops. I know our downtown here in Bardstown for many weeks, every day looked like Sunday afternoon, when everything's closed down. And then, even the lady who cuts my hair has been out of work for many weeks. And I finally got a chance to go back and get a haircut. But it has affected so many lives, and this was just kind of thrust on us. But it's kind of clarified, I think, a lot of our thinking about moving forward. What's important in our lives.
I fully agree, and you hate to think that it would take a pandemic for us to see that our leaders haven't been paying attention to us. But we got to take advantage of this moment to make sure that we don't go through this again. We'll get through this together, but we got to make sure it doesn't happen again. And, I think about those small businesses a whole lot. Folks that are having to close their doors, and their employees, staff is being let go, and their livelihoods being taken away. And that is another reason why I support healthcare for everyone, because that should not be an expense that these small businesses have to carry. And one of the things that I put out in support, I actually put out a memo on March 24th that was talking about COVID-19 and how our leadership should respond while Mitch McConnell was having cocktails with Kavanaugh. And, one of the things that I believe we should have is Paycheck Guarantee Act. There's been a conversation at the federal level for that. Mm-hmm. What that would do is provide employers the resources they need, the grants they need. So you don't have to get a loan. You don't have to have capital or collateral, because a lot of us are struggling, and we don't have those things. We can get grants to keep our payroll going, keep our lights on, so that folks can stay on payroll, so that we can take care of our workers and our employers. We just need folks that care, that see that prioritize it, and I'm committed to it.
Well, Representative Booker, I know that the federal government has had several rounds of funding in response to COVID-19 and its impact, the Payroll Protection Program, et cetera, CARES Act money. Do you believe there's more work to do from the federal government as far as stimulus or helping recovery efforts? Because this has been a tremendous drain on our overall economy, and in some places worse than others.
Yeah, you're so right, and we have a lot more work to do. I think what you've seen in the relief packages that have gone forward so far has been an incremental step approach to see if they can do as little as they can for regular people, while giving as much money as they can to big corporations, and then just hoping that it would be enough. But because we did not prioritize people to begin with, and then the administration, just really bumbled the response to coronavirus, trying to treat it like it was a myth instead of making sure that we had, the protective medical equipment for everyone, that we were working on vaccines, that we were investing in, our health organizations to be prepared for this. It left us at a place where the bottom essentially started falling out, for so many people. And, I think another thing that is really important now, some of the policies that I've been talking about is, we mentioned earlier, universal basic income, giving people the financial freedom, because we work so hard anyway to create all those record profits for those corporations. Mm-hmm. Giving regular folks an equity stake in the economy that we've built is not a handout. It's justice, and it's due. And if we do that, folks can do more than just go paycheck to paycheck. And when crises come, they can be ready for them. So I just think all of this is giving us the chance to do right by Kentuckians, and I intend to.
Mm-hmm. We talk about the pandemic has made a lot of differences in almost everything, and I think particularly in the protests, the people are available for protesting because they're not working right now.
Yeah. I've thought about that a lot, and I've been marching. I've been marching for years, but I've certainly been in the street across Kentucky with my mask on and bumping elbows, but praying with folks, singing out with folks, saying that we deserve a brighter future. And you're right. I think this pandemic has caused a lot of people to slow down and to look around at what's going on, because the things that are happening right now are not new. Right. They're certainly not new in places like where I'm from. And I knew Breonna Taylor. She was really good friends with my cousin TJ, who was murdered on Easter Sunday 4 years ago. And what I'm seeing now across Kentucky, I'm be back on the road again later today, is that a lot of people are standing up to say, what do we need to do? We can't let things like this keep happening, and we don't want our door kicked in. We don't want to be killed in our home, in our bed while we're sleeping. Right. And I'm really proud of Kentuckians taking a stand and showing the world what we're about, because the whole country's watching us right now to see what we do in response. And we're going to let them know what we're made of. And, we're going to make sure that our government is accountable to us. We're going to secure liberty and freedom for every Kentuckian, and we're going to win this daggone race.
Well, speaking of criminal, or not just criminal justice, but police reform,
Yeah.
there's tremendous anger across the country, and particularly coming from the African American and other people of color. And I will tell you that as an old white guy, the only time I ever hear much about this issue has been historically when there's a news story about it, and
Yeah.
I don't think I personally have ever experienced it. So,
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's hard for me to really understand the level of anger and how long this has really gone on in communities around the country, and I'm sure that's what's fueled this anger and and rising up and saying no more. Let's change things. What are any specific platform or changes you think we need to really examine either locally or nationally as far as policing reform?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, I think what we're seeing now is Kentuckians saying that we all want peace.
Mm-hmm.
We all want justice. We all want our government to do right by us, and that's all. And what I've been pushing for when I talk about system level change for all Kentuckians and structural change, I'm really talking about structural and institutional racism and inequity. And like you said, a lot of this stuff happens in ways that are very nuanced. And if you don't come from where I come from, or have a little money in your pocket like me, or look the way I do, it may fly by you. And I think this moment where we're all seeing what it looks like to have an officer have their knee on a human being's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I think it's just shocking everybody's conscience. Like, wait a minute, that is not right.
Right.
And some of the things that I believe we need to do in the immediate term is make sure we're protecting the civil rights of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of qualified immunity, where essentially if you engage with law enforcement and if your rights are infringed upon, there is no recourse in a lot of cases. Right. And that's not right. We have our constitutional rights. We have our rights as Americans, and they should be respected. And then I think we need, at the federal level, what I'm going to be pushing for is we need a police system review board that will look at how all of our law enforcement agencies are handling their training, how they are engaging with citizens in the community, how they're allocating funding. And here's a big thing. We cannot continue to put more and more money into policing at the expense of making sure we're actually investing in public safety. Right. It's not fair to the men and women in uniform to be everything public safety. And in a place like Louisville, where the budget for our law enforcement is more than all the other agencies combined, which means we're not dealing with mental health issues, we're not properly investing in the fact that poverty is pervasive and so many people are struggling. And then all we say is, all right, police officers, go handle everything. That's not fair to them, and it's not making us safer. And so what I'm actually saying is we need to fully fund public safety. And I think what you're hearing across the country is a cry out to do just that. And I intend to go to Washington to help make that happen. One of the bills, the last thing I'll say is, there was a Law Enforcement Trust and Integrity Act that was proposed over the last couple of years that, Mitch McConnell, of course, has been turning his back on. And it would deal with training. It would deal with accreditation. It would deal with funding. And it would deal with making sure that officers are focused on community policing so that we can build trust. We can do those things. And getting rid of Mitch McConnell is going to be a big step in that process.
Well, I know that I've talked to some friends of mine who are in LMPD, and you're absolutely right. They're basically sent out and say, you deal with everything from mental health issues to domestic violence and everything in between. And you're asking the officers to do a lot, and you really wonder, well, is there training? Are they trained to work to identify mental health issues? And so we're asking them to do a lot, and then you wonder why mistakes are made or why there's bad judgment. Yeah.
And same thing in our schools. If they're not trained to deal with young people that may be suffering from trauma, they may not have had anything to eat the night before. They may be homeless, like I was. We got to invest in our communities. We got to invest in people, and we can protect men and women in law enforcement that know we need those changes. We just need leadership with the courage to do it.
All right, sir. Well, I know we're just about down to the wire. We've got to take a break for some commercials. I want to thank you for your time today. Anything you want to leave with our listeners before, because I know the election is just a few days away now.
Yeah. I just want to say that I love Kentucky. I love this place so much. I jump in front of a train for it. And I just believe that if we stand as regular folks together, we can do anything. And, of course, that means we can beat Mitch. And because of my vision and my platform and folks standing with us, we've raised over $2 million in the last week. And we are building this movement for Kentucky, not outsiders, not other folks who don't care about us. And I'm asking everyone for their support, their prayers, and let's win this for Kentucky.
All right, sir. Well, Representative Booker, thank you for coming on today, and it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you both.
All right, we'll look forward to having you back on in the fall before the primary or the
Absolutely.
All right, sir.
Okay.
Thank you again.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.